everybody, it's Margie Meacham. Welcome back to the Learning to Go podcast. And my guest today is Mike Simmons. Mike is the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. They're a full-service sales management consultancy, and they build sales capability and capacity for organizations. He's held operations, consulting, sales, and executive leadership roles for major companies like UPS, Smartforce, Skillsoft, and Safari Books Online. And the reason I invited Mike here today is because we share a lot of interest in revitalizing and modernizing the sales training industry, which quite frankly, in many cases is lagging behind in terms of applying what we've learned the last few years about how the brain works. So I am real excited to have Mike here today to join me. So welcome, Mike. Let's start by just asking you to tell us a little more about your organization and the role you play in it.
Margie, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be on the podcast. I'm the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. Mike and I, the other co-founder, take a divide and conquer approach. So either he or I will work with individual clients, or we'll team up with individual clients, leaning on my operational capabilities, his strategic capabilities. So what we've done in this partnership is created a way where we could leverage both of our strengths in any of the client interactions we have.
Okay, and so as you're working with those clients, let's say that Learning to Go gets a whole lot larger than it is right now. I was going to say busier, but really I'm plenty busy. But let's say I decide I want to build a sales force. What are some of the challenges that I'm going to face today in building a sales team from scratch?
I think the biggest challenge, and we see this over and over again, the cycle repeats itself, is building a team too fast. Many founders, early stage companies who are delivering a new product to the marketplace, believe that they've established product market fit, primarily measured through discussions with friends and family, as opposed to really testing it outside the market. There's a completely different conversation when you talk to somebody about what their feeling is about an idea or a concept, and then you start to make that transition to, would you pay for it? Do you actually see enough value in it? And so one of the mistakes they'll make is they will hire a salesperson with my background, my LinkedIn profile, and what they don't know is that I really need a lot of additional support to have me be effective. I might need more marketing material. I might need more product training. I may be successful just because I've cultivated a really good network. I may not be very good at picking up the phone and doing cold outreach. So what we do is we first look to understand what's happening inside the organization. How do they do their jobs? How do people inside the organization perceive the product or the service that they're delivering? How does the market perceive the product or the service that they're delivering? How does their ideal customer profile, their ideal customer, the buyer, perceive the market, the product in the market? And from there, we design based on our understanding of the needs. We also initially take a strong focus on generating revenue. We want to demonstrate a capability to sell or deliver the product in the market before we start hiring a number of other sales reps to do that. So to summarize that, I would say, don't rush into hiring. Make sure that you've validated product market fit before you make that hire, and make sure that you hire the salesperson to meet the specific need you have in the organization today, not where you expect your organization to be in 18 to 24 months, because you might not get there.
Okay, so that made me think of another question, and that is, how do you know what you need today, and how do you know if, everybody now, there's so much information on how to be a great interviewer. And of course, salespeople, they're selling you during the interview. So how do you know that you've really got the right fit versus somebody who sounds good and looks good, but isn't really going to be able to deliver what you need?
if I knew that, I probably would be training people on interviewing. What I can do is I can share how we approach it.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we approach it is we first look for attitude and initiative. Does the candidate demonstrate attitude and initiative in the conversation? Did they go out and test the product? Did they go out and talk with others inside their network about how that product might fit inside in a scenario based on a problem that they understand that it solves? Did they show the initiative to take a couple of extra steps and demonstrate that they are interested in getting information about the product, the service, or what the organization does? Initiative can even be doing the basic research. We've gone through instances here recently where we've been interviewing candidates, and we've had just a handful of candidates mention the podcast that we have out there. That automatically leveled those candidates up because they had demonstrated the initiative to go out and do that extra 5 or 10 minutes of research. On the attitude side, it's how do they respond to questions? What does the nonverbal, what's their nonverbal reaction? How do they describe how they handle conflict inside organizations? So we tend to focus our questions on more of the behavioral side and scenario-based ideas. And we understand that a sales rep can come up with their canned example of how they handled this challenge inside an organization. But by interviewing both with me, with Mike, with a couple of other members of our team, we start to add additional brushstrokes to the painting, and we get a better picture of who that person is and how they might fit inside our organization. We look at it from the perspective of you can train the technical skills, you can train product knowledge, you can train on market fit, you can train all of those things. But if you don't have that strong attitude and initiative, it's going to be really hard to keep people motivated and excited about what they're doing.
I've been paying attention, and I've done a lot of sales training in my day, and I've been a salesperson in my day. It seems to me the industry hasn't moved the needle much in the last 20 years. The big companies are selling essentially the same thing that they've been doing all this time. So I think it's ripe for an update and a revamp. So Mike, I'm taking a look at how the sales training industry needs to be revamped now. At least that's my opinion. What do you think are some of the things we need to start doing differently when we think about training today's salesperson?
I think before the viewpoint historically has been, on aggressive questioning techniques, leading people with this view of always be closing, all of these ideas of, how do I move people through my process rather than taking a customer oriented approach. And when you go into sales training, it's got to be more about those softer skills that around empathy, skills around communication, skills around listening, skills around being that guiding light to the customer that helps them work through the journey that they're in the process of. Many organizations are out there talking about the buyer's journey or the customer's journey. And I think that successful sales reps as we go forward will be those who help lead the customer through that process, help them navigate through that journey, rather than be the ones who are always knocking on the door, asking for status updates and asking for access to others inside the organization, or pitching product just for the sake of pitching product. Anytime you're talking, you're focused on yourself. When you're listening, you should be focused on gathering information from the person you're working with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think you've touched on a lot of the things that just rub me, not only me, but most people the wrong way these days. That they're kind of borderline manipulative about, I just need to get something out of you. as the salesperson. I'm trying to get to the decision maker. I'm trying to understand your decision process, as opposed to what can I do for you? What do you need from me? And that reminds me of the work of Dr. Paul Zak, and I'm going to provide a link to the listeners of this podcast because he was on this show recently, and he talked about this whole nature of building trust and how really nothing happens until that buyer trusts you. And that is a physical reaction that happens in your brain. And it usually happens in the first 30 seconds of meeting with someone. You decide whether or not you trust them. If that trust connection doesn't happen, the salesperson could spend weeks or months or never make the connection that is going to win them the sale. So part of what I'm hearing from you about empathy and relating and recognizing what you can do, it are all things that can help build trust. But let me see what you think of this. But in my opinion, only if they're sincere. So we can't just teach salespeople, do these actions, act this way, say these things, and they're going to work, because they have to really mean it. They have to really care about that person in front of them and about serving them. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. They have to care. So, they have to believe in the product or service that they're selling. They have to believe in the problem that has been identified in the marketplace that justifies why that product or service makes sense in the marketplace. They have to empathize with their customer and really try to put themselves in their shoes. And there's a lot of talk about this in marketing today around personas. And I think it's a really interesting concept and idea about developing and designing personas, your buyer persona. And when the beauty of designing something like that is that you work to get in the mind of the person who's on that end. What motivates them? Why do they do what they do? How do they do it? What are their challenges? What do they do when they're outside of work? What are their tendencies? And the more that you understand that, then you can actually be a partner. And you've mentioned a couple of different things through this, both trust. One of my favorite books out there, and it's one from way back, but The Trusted Advisor, I think has really helped me be a better consultant and do better in sales and work better with customers. But trust, building rapport, caring are critical, and you've got to have the right attitude in order to do that. You can't be that stereotypical, what's it going to take to get you in this car today kind of mentality.
Exactly. And for those learning professionals who may not always work with sales training, if you're wondering whether or not this applies to you, let me just tell you, whether you recognize it or not, you are in sales, because every piece of learning that you design has to first be sold to that learner before they will take it on and learn and become engaged. So we are all salespeople. And so the skills and the concepts that Mike and I are talking about, they apply to all of us, whether you are designing compliance training or customer service training, product training, or actual sales training, or anything else. And with that, Mike, I'd like you to just remind everyone where they can get your top-rated sales podcast. And I'm going to encourage my listeners to think about it as really a training podcast, a training skills podcast. So Mike, tell us a little about your podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Margie. Yeah, it is. It's available at catalystsale.com. At the top of the page, there'll be a link for podcast. You could also search iTunes, Google Play, or any podcast service that you use. It's Catalyst Sale Podcast, and that's 2 words. We'll have a link, I'm sure, in the show notes here as well. And what you'll find is that we talk about, just like Margie had said, we talk about not only things that apply in sales, but apply in life in general. I mean, we talked recently about the emotional roller coasters that you run into in this role, and working with clients, and all of us can appreciate that. As learning professionals who are working with clients, we know the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of those projects and how they engage. So look forward to getting feedback from the community on the content, and we do answer listener questions, so we look forward to your questions too.
Okay, great. And how can people get in touch with you?
Best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm at Simmons_M on Twitter. And also pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm starting to tone down LinkedIn a little bit. LinkedIn's become kind of a mess. I'm not getting as much value out of it, so I'm trying to figure that out. But Twitter, for me, I look at that as I've got this great tribe of people who curate resources for me based on the people that I follow, and would love to communicate with anybody on Twitter.
We share that in common. I really find Twitter is just been a wonderful way for me to find and build my tribe. And in fact, you and I first connected on a Twitter chat. So, I highly recommend that to everybody. And I just want to thank you again, Mike, for being on. My guest has been Mike Simmons. And those of you who are listening, you have the show notes. I please encourage you to also check out his site and his podcast, and you'll probably see me there sometime soon. And Mike is the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. So thanks, everybody. I hope you join us for the next edition of the Learning to Go podcast. And please check out all the links. We will be talking with you next time.